The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Instead, it became the moment everything shattered. I still remember standing there, in the back room of the church, my white dress flowing around me like a pool of hope. I was fixing my veil when the door swung open hard enough to rattle the hinges. My mother and father stepped inside. Their faces weren't glowing with pride or love. They were stone cold. Dad didn't even hesitate. His voice sliced through the room like a knife. Don't even think about showing up at the reception. You've already ruined enough. Your sister's marriage fell apart because of you. I blinked, confused, thinking surely they had the wrong person, or maybe this was some twisted joke. But then my mother chimed in, her arms crossed tightly. We can't have you ruining today, too. People are already talking. I felt my heart crumple in my chest, but I stayed frozen, rooted to the spot, my hands clutching the bouquet so tightly that the stem snapped. In the doorway behind them, I caught glimpses of a few relatives peeking in, pity and judgment swimming in their eyes. I searched for just one friendly face. I found none. The weight of the moment pressed down harder when my father muttered under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear, "Your brother, he's the golden child. We can't let your mess stain this family any further." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. Something deeper inside me, something old and tired and worn thin from years of being the scapegoat, just let go. With all the dignity I could muster, I straightened my back, smoothed down the front of my dress, and set the crushed bouquet gently on the nearby table. Without a word, I walked past them head high, ignoring the stunned, murmuring crowd outside the room. I reached the parking lot, the cool evening air brushing against my skin, each step away from the church peeling off another layer of invisible chains that had bound me for so long. I sat in my car for a moment, staring blankly at the steering wheel. Then, with shaking fingers, I pulled out my phone. There was one last gift I had given, one last thread still tying me to them. The honeymoon fund. Thousands of dollars I had quietly saved up over the past 2 years, transferred as a gesture of love and celebration. I found the banking app, heart thudding in my ears. I scrolled to the recent transactions. There it was, the payment to my sister, Samantha. I pressed cancel transfer. A quick confirmation button popped up. Without hesitation, I clicked it. The money drained back into my account. A clean break. Before I could second-guess myself, I snapped a screenshot of the cancellation confirmation. I attached it to a blank text message to Samantha. No words, no explanation, just cold, hard reality. I hit send, and then I blocked her, blocked my mother, blocked my father, blocked every number that had ever made me feel less than enough. One by one, the invisible strings that had tangled around my heart for years were snipped away with each block button. As I drove away from the church that night, still in my wedding dress, still wearing my makeup like some tragic mask, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply stared out at the empty highway stretching ahead of me and whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Never again." Driving through the dark that night, I couldn't help but remember, not just the cruelty of today, but the thousands of smaller cuts that had been leading here all along. It was never really about the wedding. It was about a lifetime of being invisible in my own family. I saw flashes of my childhood like a movie reel playing in the rearview mirror. There I was 8 years old, holding up a math trophy almost as big as my head, standing in the kitchen doorway, beaming, waiting for someone to notice. Mom barely glanced up from her phone. Dad muttered something about how it would have been better if it were sports. Tyler, my perfect older brother, threw a football across the room and knocked the trophy out of my hands. Nobody even scolded him. They laughed. Another flash. My 12th birthday. I sat at the kitchen table, a homemade cake in front of me that I had baked myself. Everyone was too busy planning Tyler's varsity party to remember. I lit my own candles, sang softly to myself. I made a wish that maybe next year they would notice. It never came true. Then there were the comparisons. Always the comparisons. Tyler was handsome, athletic, charming. I was bookish, too quiet, too sensitive. I wasn't a golden child. I wasn't even silver. I was the smudged, forgotten bronze in the back of the display case. I used to think if I just worked harder, if I just became more impressive, They would have no choice but to love me the way they loved him. Straight A's, scholarships, a good job, every achievement met with a pat on the head and a backhanded compliment. You're doing well for a girl. Imagine if Tyler had your grades, he'd be unstoppable. I spent so many years trying to earn what should have been given freely. Love, respect, a seat at the table. Somewhere along the way, I started to realize love that has to be earned by suffering isn't love at all. It's control. It's manipulation. It's a trap. And I had been trapped for so long, desperately trying to be good enough for people who never intended to see me in the first place. Tonight, walking away from them wasn't just about the wedding. It was about setting down all the invisible weights they had piled on my shoulders since the day I was born. I pulled the car over at a deserted overlook, climbed out still wearing my dress, and stood staring out at the endless stretch of stars above me. For the first time in my life, I felt something unfamiliar blooming in my chest. Not fear, not sadness, freedom. The cold night wind whipped my hair around my face, and I let it. I let it tear away everything false and broken. I wasn't the broken one. I never had been. I had just been surrounded by people who wanted me to believe I was. And as I stood there in the quiet darkness, I promised myself this was the last time I would ever beg for a place where I was not wanted. The days after that night blurred together into a heavy, aching silence. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't check the texts. I needed space, and I wasn't about to let them steal that from me, too. For the first time, I chose myself over their guilt trips and manipulations. But that didn't mean the pain wasn't there. At work, I kept my head down, smiled at the right moments, but inside I was carrying 1,000 tiny bruises that no one could see. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart raced like it had when I was a little girl, hoping maybe, just maybe they would say, "We're sorry. We were wrong. We love you." But they didn't. The first message came from Mom. Short, sharp. "You should be ashamed. You ruined your brother's wedding by making it about yourself." I stared at the screen, disbelief washing over me. I had been asked not to come. I had stayed away. And somehow, I was still the villain in their story. Then came Tyler's message. "Grow up, Claire. Not everything is about you." Funny. All my life, everything had been about him. His wins, his parties, his happiness. I had been just another piece of furniture in the background of a spotlight. For a moment, I almost replied. I almost defended myself, explained, pleaded for them to see me clearly for once. But then I remembered the girl standing alone under the stars, breathing free for the first time. I deleted the messages. Silence, I realized, was my new armor. They didn't deserve my words anymore. And yet, despite everything, a small part of me grieved. I wasn't losing something new. I was grieving the hope I had clung to for years, that one day they would change. That one day they would look at me and not see a disappointment, a nuisance, an afterthought. Some dreams don't die all at once. They unravel thread by thread until you're left standing in the ruins, realizing it was never real to begin with. I leaned into that grief. I let myself cry, not because they deserved my tears, but because I deserved my own kindness. And somewhere in that quiet heartbreak, something stronger began to take root. They could think what they wanted. They could twist the story however they needed to sleep at night. I knew the truth. I knew I had walked away with my head held high, without screaming, without scenes. I had done what they could never do. I had chosen peace over pride. A few days later, while cleaning out my apartment, I found a small photo album tucked into a box. Childhood pictures. Tyler in the front, grinning. Me in the background, blurry and forgotten. I flipped through it slowly, feeling the sting, but also the clarity. I didn't belong in their story anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was a gift. Instead of throwing the album away, I tucked it back into the box. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder. A reminder that survival wasn't enough for me anymore. I was going to live, really live, and if that meant walking alone for a while, so be it. I wasn't walking backward anymore. I was building something new, something real, something mine. The months that followed my wedding day felt like trudging through a thick fog. There were days when I would wake up and for a brief, flickering second, I would forget everything that had happened. I would stretch, blink into the morning light, and think about calling my mom just to say good morning. Then reality would slam into my chest like a freight train, and I would remember they had chosen her lies over my truth. I threw myself into work, into building a life that didn't orbit around their approval anymore. It wasn't easy. At night, when the world was quiet, the silence screamed at me. Memories would replay in my mind like a broken record. My mom's cold voice, my dad's disappointed eyes, my sister's fake tears, her hands trembling with such perfect rehearsed sadness. I wondered how long she had been planning it, how many times she had smiled to my face while sharpening a knife behind my back. But even through the heartache, something strange was happening deep inside me, something solid and new. I was starting to understand that I didn't need their validation to exist. I didn't have to spend my life bending and breaking myself to fit into a place they never wanted me to belong in the first place. Their love had conditions. Their loyalty had a price. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped paying. One night, I sat on my small balcony, staring out at the city lights. My phone buzzed on the table next to me. It was a photo from my sister, her and my parents, laughing together at some family barbecue. A caption underneath read, "Family is everything." For a second, the old familiar ache clawed at my chest. I almost texted back. Almost. Instead, I turned my phone face down. I closed my eyes and thought about the version of me they still pictured, the quiet one, the one who would always shrink herself down, apologize for existing, beg for scraps of attention. That version was gone. She had died the day I stood alone at the altar, scanning the crowd for faces that would never come. I decided then that if they could rewrite history, so could I. Not with petty fights. Not with desperate phone calls begging them to see the truth. No, I would rewrite it with my actions, with my success, with the undeniable proof that I was worth something, even if they had thrown me away like I was nothing. The decision wasn't loud. It wasn't some cinematic epiphany. It was quiet, steady, like a river carving a canyon over years of patience and persistence. I would live a life that spoke for itself. I would heal, not because they deserved a better version of me, but because I deserved a better version of myself. As I sat there, the cool night air brushing against my skin, I realized something powerful. My sister might have one that day. She might have stolen my family, my wedding day, and my peace. But she could never steal my future unless I handed it to her. And I wasn't going to. I breathed in deep, filling my lungs with the sharp, cleansing air. Somewhere inside me, a flicker of peace caught flame. It was small, but it was real. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself a small, knowing smile. This wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. Months slipped into the next year, but life wasn't as empty as it had once seemed. The sting of my family's betrayal still lingered, but in those quiet moments of reflection, I could feel myself growing stronger. There was a certain calm that came with learning to live without their approval, without the need to explain myself to anyone who wasn't willing to listen. I started doing things for myself. For the first time in years, I traveled alone, a concept I never would have dared to entertain in my old life. Every new place I visited brought me a sense of freedom I didn't know I was missing, freedom from the family dynamics that had stifled me. The world was bigger than their opinions, and every day felt like a small victory, like I was reintroducing myself to who I really was. But then one evening my phone rang. The name on the screen made my heart stop. It was from my sister. I hadn't heard from her since that night, the night she chose her lies over me and destroyed everything. I stared at the phone, the pulse of my anger rising, but I didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't sure what I expected to hear when I listened to the message later. But when her voice came through, I felt an odd mix of detachment and discomfort. "Hey," she said, her tone dripping with insincerity. "I just wanted to say I think we should talk. It's been a long time, and I really miss you. It's not like it used to be, you know? Please call me back. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened." Her words hit me like a cold wind. She missed me? After everything she'd done, after the way she had thrown me away like I was nothing, she missed me? It was clear what she wanted. She didn't want to apologize. She wanted to make it all go away. She wanted to rewrite the story and pretend she was the victim. I let the voicemail sit there for days, listening to it once, twice, just to remind myself of how hollow her words really were. She was trying to pull me back into her version of the world, where I was the scapegoat, the one who was always wrong, always less than her. And yet, as I sat there listening to her voice, I felt a strange sense of release. She no longer had the power to hurt me. She didn't have the power to make me feel small anymore. I had broken free of her narrative, of my family's narrative. The truth didn't need to be explained anymore. My silence was louder than any words I could say. I thought about the way she had spun her lies, painting me as the villain to justify her actions. I thought about the damage she had caused, not just to me, but to herself too. She might have thought she had one, that she could manipulate everyone around her into believing her version of the truth. But deep down I knew she would never be truly happy, not while living a life built on lies. That's when the idea hit me. It wasn't just about moving on anymore. I had already moved on. It was about closing the chapter. She would have to face the consequences of what she had done, even if she didn't realize it yet. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. Quiet, dignified justice. And it wasn't for her, it was for me. I spent the next few days reflecting on what that might look like. I wasn't going to go to her and demand an apology or confront my family. That would only drag me back into their toxic cycle. No, my justice would be something bigger, something that would speak for itself. I wasn't going to fight them with words anymore. I would fight with my actions, with my success. And when the time was right, I would let the truth come to light, not through shouting, but through undeniable proof. Because I knew, deep down, that no matter how much she twisted the story, the truth had its own way of coming out. And when it did, her mask would shatter. The day of the family gathering finally arrived, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me. It had been years since I last set foot in that house, the one where I had once been made to feel like a stranger. But now everything was different. I was different. The woman who once stood on the edge of that family's expectations, waiting for their approval, was no longer there. I had let go of that version of myself. Still, as I drove up the familiar road, memories from the past surfaced. Some sweet, but mostly bitter. I remembered how, as a child, I would stand in the corner at family gatherings, hoping someone would notice me, say something kind. But no one did. My sister's laughter always drowned out the silence that followed my attempts at conversation, as if I didn't even exist. And even when I achieved something noteworthy, it was Tyler who got the spotlight. Always Tyler, the golden child. Now, as I approached the house, I felt nothing but resolve. I wasn't here to relive the past. I was here to finish something that had been left unfinished for too long. It wasn't about seeking revenge or getting validation. It was about reclaiming what was mine, my peace, my truth. When I walked through the door, the tension was palpable. The room fell silent, everyone's eyes turning toward me. My sister, who had been the architect of my suffering, sat at the center of it all, her eyes narrowing as she took me in. But there was something different about her expression now. It wasn't the smugness I had grown accustomed to. It was a flicker of uncertainty. "Look who finally decided to show up," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "It's been a long time, hasn't it?" I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. The air between us was thick with the weight of unspoken words. Her mask, the one she had worn for so long, was starting to slip, and I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't as sure of herself as she had once been. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch between us. This moment wasn't for her. It wasn't for the rest of the family, either. It was for me. "I'm not here for the past," I said quietly. "I'm here because I'm done with pretending. Done with pretending to be the villain. Done with pretending to be something I'm not. So I'll say it plainly. I know what you did." Her smile faltered just for a second, but she quickly masked it again, trying to regain control. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice tightening. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I replied. "The lies, the manipulation, the way you turned everyone against me without a second thought. All because you wanted something I had, something I didn't even know was worth taking." Her face grew pale as the room around us seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, I thought she would lash out, deny everything, but instead she sat there frozen. Maybe it was because she realized she no longer held the power to make me feel small. She had lost that, and then I did it. I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table toward her. On the screen was the proof. The screenshots, the messages, the evidence of the web of lies she had spun, not just to our family, but to others as well. All the things she had claimed about me, all the things she had said to paint me as the villain. Her eyes widened as she looked at the phone, the color draining from her face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in years, she was speechless. Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling, and I could see it happening in real time. I didn't wait for her to react. There was no need. The truth was out now, and that was enough. I didn't have to explain myself anymore. The family could make their own judgment, and if they didn't believe me, that was their choice. I had nothing more to say. Without a word, I stood up and walked out, leaving the family in stunned silence. But as I left, I knew one thing. I had taken back my power. I had exposed the lies, and no matter what came next, they couldn't take that away from me. The silence that followed my departure from the family gathering was suffocating. I didn't need to check my phone to know what was coming. The texts, the missed calls, the messages, all from the people who had once made me feel invisible. My sister, my parents, even my cousins, they were all scrambling to reach me, trying to figure out what had just happened. I sat in my car for a moment, letting the weight of it all settle. It was strange, really. For years, I had tried to prove my worth to them, tried to make them see me as more than just a quiet, unremarkable child. And yet, despite all that, they had continued to treat me like an afterthought. They had discarded me, used me, and discarded me again. But now they were begging for my attention, for my forgiveness. I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm as I looked at my phone. The texts were pouring in, each one more frantic than the last. My sister, of course, was the first to reach out, her words laced with fake concern. "Please, Emma, you don't understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Her words were hollow, empty. She was trying to salvage what she could, trying to make me believe that it was all just a misunderstanding. But I knew better. I knew the truth. And the truth was that she had lied. She had betrayed me, manipulated me, and painted me as the villain for years. I didn't respond right away. There was no need to. I didn't owe her anything. But as I sat there in the quiet of my car, something inside me shifted. I had already exposed the lies. I had already taken back my power. Now it was time to let go, to release myself from the anger, the resentment, the pain. I deleted her messages without a second thought. I blocked her number, just like I had done with the others. I didn't need them anymore. I had spent so many years trying to be something I wasn't for them, trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect sister. But no matter how hard I tried, they had never seen me for who I truly was. And now I had freed myself from their grip. But as the hours passed and the messages continued to pile up, something strange happened. I didn't feel the anger I thought I would. I didn't feel the satisfaction of revenge. Instead, I felt peace. A quiet, steady peace that I hadn't felt in years. For the first time in a long time, I realized that I didn't need them. I didn't need their approval, their love, or their validation. I was enough on my own. I had always been enough. I sat back in my seat and took a deep breath, letting the weight of the decision I had made settle in. This wasn't just about exposing my sister's lies. It was about something deeper. It was about taking control of my own narrative, about no longer allowing anyone to define me. And as I looked at the phone once more, I finally replied to one of the messages. But it wasn't what they expected. "Thanks for everything," I wrote, my fingers steady on the keys. "I'm finally at peace." I hit send, and just like that, I was done. There was no anger, no bitterness in my heart, just a quiet, resolute peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you no longer have to fight for a place in anyone's life. The kind of peace that comes from understanding that sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away. I blocked them all, and I didn't look back. Weeks passed, and life continued without the weight of my family's expectations hanging over me. I had cut all ties, erased all remnants of their presence in my life, and it felt like breathing for the first time in years. No longer did I feel like I was trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for me. I had learned to let go, to reclaim my peace in a way I never thought possible. But even in that quiet, I could feel the ripple of the bomb I had dropped. My sister had tried to reach out again, a few more apologies and explanations, but her messages were just more words. The truth had already been laid bare. I didn't need any more reasons, any more manipulations to keep me tied to the past. One evening, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I had a feeling. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Emma. It was my dad. His voice was softer now, laced with guilt. I know you're upset with us, but I need you to understand we didn't mean to hurt you. I sat there in silence, listening to him stumble over his words. There was a time not so long ago when I would have immediately tried to appease him, to make him see that I was still part of this family. But that was no longer who I was. No, I said, my voice calm steady. You don't need to explain. I've heard enough. He was quiet on the other end. For a moment, I could feel his confusion, his attempt to hold on to whatever semblance of control he thought he had left. But it was too late. The walls I had built around myself were strong, and this time I wasn't letting anyone in. You were right, I continued. I did ruin the photos, but it wasn't because of anything I did. It was because of what you did to me. You treated me like I didn't matter, like I was invisible. I paused, letting the words sink in. I don't need your apology, I said softly but firmly. I've already forgiven you, but I'm not coming back. For a moment, there was only silence, and then finally a soft sigh from my father. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up, feeling a sense of closure wash over me. That was it. The final moment. The final separation. It wasn't just the end of a phone call. It was the end of the story I had been writing for so long. A story where I was nothing more than a side character in someone else's narrative. And with that one sentence, I had closed the book. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, looking out the window at the city lights. The phone remained silent. My mind wandered, but it wasn't to the past, it was to the future. For the first time, I felt like I was finally free. I had taken back control. I had exposed the truth. And I had walked away with dignity, with my head held high. No longer was I the girl who needed to prove herself. No longer was I the invisible one. I was Emma, just Emma, and for the first time that was enough.